Hi there and welcome to my channel. Thanks for stopping by. So I'm just gonna, before I get started with what I really want to talk about today, so very briefly, I call this the channel of, work in progress, kind of following the yellow brick road, letting this channel kind of take us to where it's supposed to go or be, without a whole lot of my interruption of whatever that's supposed to be. However, I have continually had this idea in mind, and so far it's still really alive, is to having conversations with people like you and me about your stories of your life's journey. And when I say people like you and me, what do I mean? I mean, you don't have to be an author, you don't have to be a near-death experiencer, you don't have to be having your own particular channel, nothing, just everyday person living life who's having their experiences. So that's what I'm looking to have, who to have conversations with. And if this idea appeals to you, then just look below the video and there's my contact information. Give me a holler and let's see where that can go. So that's that. Also, just reminding you, if you like this video, please like it. Also, I will hope that you subscribe to my channel. Okay, so let's get started. I want to expand on this conversation that I've had in the last couple videos, I think, maybe, about what I call triggers, or about really understanding or getting what's really making us tick. Maybe that's the way to phrase this. Like what makes us tick, meaning why do we respond or react in certain ways, to certain situations or circumstances or people? Are we even aware of that fact that we seem to have a pattern of reacting or responding into these various and different type of situations that might be going on in our life? Do we notice that this is a pattern? Are we aware when we're responding or reacting to the person or the situation or the circumstance? Are we aware that this is something that we always are responding or reacting to in a particular way? And if we are aware, what do we think about it? Do we just think, well, that's me, that's what I believe, and that's what I think, and this is what it is? I think, yeah, probably for a lot of us, if we're even wondering about it, then maybe, we just say, well, that's who I am. That's what I feel. That's it. And we go about our life, right? Well, I want to put another perspective out there to take a look at. And that is to start to maybe think about, could there be another way to look at this? And there is. So, when we react to something outside, out there, the only way that we can actually have a reaction or a response is the thing has to be within us. Meaning the trauma, most likely, the wound, the situation, the something is within. It's within the body. And there's something that happens and appears to be seemingly outside of us. So the person, the situation, the circumstance, all those different things out there are triggering all these different things in here. But in our experience, we think that this thing out there is causing me to have this particular reaction, and we react in a particular way. And to be honest, most of us stay pretty much oblivious to that. It's just an automatic thing. And there can be a variety of different reactions and responses to a variety of different situations and circumstances. And, we're thinking something out there caused me to do this. It can be as simple as you're on the freeway and you guy cuts you off and you have a reaction of anger and upset and blah blah, and you're thinking, well, it's about this guy. He's a really bad driver, and who does he think he is that he can just cut people off and he can cause accidents, and oh my God, the story can go on and on and on, right? So there's a simple example. Now, some of these reactions and responders are kind of, what do I want to call it? Kind of benign, I guess we could say. Even though it is a trigger within us, it's kind of a benign, no biggie thing necessarily that we need to really dig down deep and find out about. But most of our triggers are not benign. They are actually something that we really do need to start to take a look at. Because now where we're at in this human consciousness evolutionary process, we are trying to vibrationally have it move upward. And it's all in the body, by the way. It's the body that's going through this evolution process. So the body has been holding on to certain vibrational levels, and now it's needing, the bodies are needing to move up so that we evolve, like anything that evolves, that's what happens. So in today's world, at this very moment, as those of us on this planet right now, we are experiencing a lot of, what do I want to call it? A lot of things out in the world that we've never seen before, that seems shocking, that are like, where did this come from? Pandemic is a great example. That's what I'm talking about. And the body needs to be the one that's kind of moving through these processes. But since we are a spirit having a human experience, and we, are in this body, then this is where it all comes together in terms of how this thing kind of works. So what we've now discovered, many of us are beginning to really discover it in a big way, is that we are holding certain, what I'm going to call triggers or experiences within our body. They're like ingrained or imprinted in the body. And it's an energy, but it's an experience. And most of these, if not all of these, but at least most of these, are from childhood. And what happens is they just get imprinted in the body and kind of stay there. And, they can come from a variety of all kinds of experiences, our culture, beliefs, things we've learned, things that are what we call like being programmed in us through maybe that could be through a culture, etc. It's not just one thing like one size fits all. It's to the human mind, it can seem complicated. But basically, if we can just look at it, it's these experiences are held in the body, and this is what we're now calling triggers. Triggers meaning something inside of the body gets triggered when something outside happens. So most of us think when something outside of us happens that that we're triggered to the person or the situation, just like the idea with getting cut off on the freeway. We project out there and we have a trigger, but we don't realize what's really going on, and then rather than that, we're projecting onto that person, bad driver, bad person, whatever it is. The reality is there's nothing out there that can be out there and trigger us unless it's already in us. And when it's already in us, that out there thing has nothing to do with anything. It's just within us. So then we get triggered through certain circumstances and situations, again, that, we have in our childhood. And it's all across the board. It's all over the place on how that works. And like I said, most of the time we're just oblivious. But it's now, for sure, no doubt, the universe is pretty much saying it's time to wake up. It's time to come out of this idea that things happen out there and that's the reason that you're upset because that happened out there. It's time to take ownership, we could say, to really be responsible for what's really going on. The other day I gave an example of how I'm beginning to see my triggers. And, it's so, I mean, amazing when we see these triggers because they're so subtle, really, really subtle. And in my, I think last video, I talked about my obsession with every day watching this woman who was living in her car. And, I couldn't figure out what I was so obsessed about. And then through this process, I was able to discover that. And it was like, whoa, that is so weird. But that's what's going on. So I'd like to kind of give an idea or an example of maybe another way that I've just recently revealed to myself about a trigger. And this one is something that's been bothering me for a long time now, quite a while, as to what was really going on or why was I, what was I so triggered about? And I didn't even think of it as a trigger. I just thought something weird going on. So anyway, let me give you some background. A number of years ago, my husband and I decided to move to abroad and to become expats in a foreign country. Now, it wasn't something we just decided on a very spur of the moment, but kind of spur of the moment. And I had some resistance to it and at the beginning, and just had some resistance. But I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't know why. I decided finally when it came down to the decision making, are we going or we're not? And by the way, we're U.S. citizens, which I think you probably know, but just put it out there. I just decided, I have to go do this, or I'm going to, or I could regret that I don't. And so off we went. Now, this was, it's a process. Well, I don't know if you know, but if you've not moved to be in a foreign country, to live in a foreign country, there's a process that you have to go through. You just don't show up. It's a process in order to be literally living there, and you become, an expat. And so that's what we did. We had to go through that entire process of becoming an expat and, doing the things you do to live anywhere. You bought a house and blah, blah, blah. But what I want to focus on in this whole thing is that I, through the years and from the beginning, and it didn't change, felt a huge discomfort about being an expat in a foreign country. And I couldn't tell you or me or anybody why. I just had such an uneasy discomfort feeling of being an expat. Now, there was no reason for it that I could find, but it was there. It was just always there. And it particularly would be an increased discomfort during the times, like I think it was once a year you have to renew your papers, and you go to, in this case, you go through the government and blah, blah, blah. You have to go through that whole paper process thing. And I think we have to have an attorney, or we did. Anyway, it's not it's not a 1, 2, 3, simple 1, 2, 3. But anyway, you go through it. And at those times I'd be definitely, I don't know what to call it, just not in a good place. Definitely had a lot of concerns and fears, but I couldn't nail it. What am I concerned and fearful about? I don't know. It was just the emotional feelings of fear, a lot of fear and a lot of concern. So that was what was going on for me for all the years we were there. And when we finally moved back, which we've been back now in the States, living back in the States for a number of years now, is when I kind of, that feeling subsided, obviously, because it was no longer in front of me. However, it's always been like this mystery of what were some of my issues about living in this particular, or in a foreign country. Now, I should mention, too, was a foreign country where we didn't speak the language, but, that wasn't a big deal. At some point, we got to a point where we could speak the language, plus there were plenty of people there that spoke English, and there were certainly a lot of other expats from the U.S., so we weren't living out in no man's land out there. We actually had a lot of expats, like I said, from the U.S., English speaking. Yeah, so it wasn't like a very odd or unusual situation. So now, in the most recent time, maybe in the last month or so, I don't know, I've started really investigating any of the times now that I'm feeling triggered for various and numerous things. And because it's really helping me understand what's going on. And I'm beginning to absolutely be clear that if I think something out there is happening and I'm feeling a concern, upset, whatever, I need to look within. And it's not always super obvious. It really isn't. It's actually very, very subtle. But I definitely use my guides to help me through this. I ask for help a lot during the time of trying to understand, why am I triggered by this? What's going on? And 9 times out of 10, it's going to happen in childhood. So this mystery of my living in a foreign country and being so uncomfortable, being an expat, has been, like I said, on my mind so many times, so often. So I recently started, like I said, to investigate, to inquire within, and to ask for help from my guides as to what that means. What is this about? And I discovered this whole thing about being an expat. And it's subtle, and I could have never thought of this on my own. It's not logical, so you can't go through the logical mind. It's definitely not logical. It's definitely intuitive, we could say. It's insightful that way, because I could have never put it together with this. And now that I've discovered it, 100% know that this is what it was. So I grew up in the U.S. During the time that wasn't so long after the Holocaust, and I'm growing up Jewish in Jewish family, and it was at a time where most of my friends, we all had grandparents that were immigrants, and had been raised, their family, like my mother was raised, my father, by immigrant parents. So they'd been in the U.S. for a long time, and had immigrated from different places around the world. And so that had happened. And then the Holocaust happened, of course, while my family's in the U.S., but the Holocaust happens, and it definitely affected, obviously, people who were Jewish, and though that was my family. And so all my friends had the same experience, so to speak, in that when the Holocaust finally ended, and like I said, it wasn't so long after the Holocaust that the message that was given from our grandparents, our parents, because we were Jewish, was said that, you've got to be careful. We feel safe in the U.S., but still, as a Jew, you do not go out. You don't let people necessarily know you're Jewish. You stay with your own. You've got to be cautious and careful, and because of this thing that you're Jewish. So you have to, be careful that way. And this was throughout my childhood. That from the time I can remember understanding anything. Not that that was so understandable, but in a way, I guess it was. And so this was the message. In fact, and there were other ways a lot of us were getting messages. So as a kid, I'm like 6, maybe 5 or 6, and I had a little girlfriend on our block where we'd play together. And one day I'd go to knock on her door. It was a summer day, and to get her to see if she wanted to come play dolls. And I knock on her door, and she opens the door. She comes out on her porch, and she says, "I can never play with you again because you killed Jesus." And I understood nothing. I just said, okay. And I remember she pushed me off the porch, and I come running home crying to my mother, and I'm asking my mother, who is Jesus? Now, growing up at that time, um, again, being Jewish, I hadn't even been exposed to any kind of religious training. I mean, we had a lot of traditional holidays that we did with family, but I don't know. I didn't know who Jesus was. I didn't even get what she was talking about, right? That she couldn't play with me. And so I don't know what my mother said. I don't remember, but it was clear that it had to do with me being Jewish. Okay, that's just an example. And I do remember I was so hurt by it and so shocked. I don't know. I didn't get it. But anyway, this conversation or this way of being in life was constantly repeated. I don't know why I say constantly, but continuously repeated by the grandparents, by parents, by my friends' parents. We all heard the same thing. You need to be careful. You need to stay with your own. And, for really most of through high school even, I mostly just had Jewish friends. That was it. And we stayed as a close-knit group, I guess you could say. And obviously this was coming out of fear. But as time went on and, growing up and kind of things settled down, and I don't know, it just wasn't spoken in the same way anymore, to meaning spoken about being so fearful, taking caution. And so kind of moved outside of that. And then as an adult, I moved out of the area that I grew up in and opened bigger horizons, one could say. It just, wasn't a big part of my world anymore. And I certainly had a whole variety of friends that some were Jewish, some were not. It just wasn't a big deal. I mean, it wasn't anything in my mind. I'm not saying 100% because, in back of your mind, you definitely knew because you were Jewish that there's anti-Semitism out there. But if you, stayed alert and aware, you're okay. So was that underlying thing, but, kind of there and not there. So when I've gone back now to inquire, to dig deeper about this whole thing about being the terrible feelings around being an expat, the fear that I had, finally, and through this digging and digging, I discovered that this was a trigger for me, that I was not safe in a foreign country, and that was all coming back from this childhood thing where, it was like very much said that, okay, we're in the U.S. and that's lucky because we can be pretty safe in the U.S., feel safe. However, you still have to be careful. And I can't even remember the conversation or all the things that were said, but it was very clear to me as I would have started to dig through, inquire within, what it was this whole thing about where I was living in this foreign country and feeling so frightened. And the truth is, in this country, there was no issue about, being Jewish never even dawned on me. It wasn't about that when I'm living there, that I had any connection to, at least not in my mind. It was like, no, I couldn't figure out why I felt that way. It had nothing to do, never did, never even came up as a thought or an instinct or anything that there was that concern. So how would I have put those two together? Don't ask. I don't know. I couldn't have. And this is the point, that these triggers that we have can be so subtle. That's why we can't do it from logic. We have to do it from within, and we have to really get to understand that anything happening out there can only be of any what do I want to say? It can only be triggered because it's something within us, right? So I had that within me, and then living in that foreign country, that I had this thing about being an expat. It had nothing to do with that country or anything there. It had nothing to do with any of that. It had to do with what was ingrained, what was imprinted in me. And now as I see that, it doesn't necessarily immediately take away, what do I want to call that emotion, the fearful emotion, etc. Or it doesn't, I don't know what I want to say. It doesn't, the experience is still there. That's what I have to say. The experience of what I was going through is still there, but I understand now what was going on. So I see that all of that was going on within me from a belief of program, all that had been put into me. I think mostly a belief, I would call it, around the circumstances that I was growing up in. And that stayed. And so as the body, which is trying to go through this evolution and higher vibration, it's been holding on to that. And that got triggered there as we were living in this foreign country. So I hope that makes sense, because it's hard to give these examples, because all of our examples are very different. But I think if we can begin from the part of anything that I'm feeling triggered about. Triggered means if you're feeling frightened about something, you're feeling, a lot of fear. Pandemic was a good example of many of us getting very fearful around that. And if we go into self-inquiry, we'll discover what it was that got triggered in us. And this, even though, many of us, I guess most of us really had never been through a pandemic before, but it was representing something within us. And so, it was being put out there to the collective. So the collective, it gained momentum of being frightened of, and especially, at the beginning, during the beginning of this, it was, we were all getting triggered, probably but to varying degrees. So that's what we have to look at, the varying degrees. So depending on what our triggers are, it could be more or less, or a lot, or a little, right? So the purpose and the result of really going into inquiry within ourselves to see when something happens out there, that it's something that's really going on in here, to just get to that place, to begin to notice when you are having a feeling, a reaction, an attitude of something out there, something is getting what we call triggered, and I think it's a good word. It's getting, clicked, it's being shown, it's all about within. And that's where we can begin to live from our truth. And the other thing that happens, it takes a lot of energy to hold these triggers in the body. It's a lot of energy. We just don't realize it. And once we can see through it, and again, it's not logic, it's through the inner work. But once we can see through it, then it's released, and we release energy, and there's a sense of more freedom and not being stuck, and being more, what is the word I want? More open, more an openness. We're not feeling limited. It's the opposite of lack, right? It's just feeling like we're breathing easier, and we are. So the goal right now for many of us is to really stay on top of this. And I don't know if I'm ever going to run out of triggers. I don't know. But staying on top of it helps me keep releasing, and that's what's helping us through an evolution. So each one of us that begin to release some of these traumas that we've got going on, and we're being exposed to how to release them, because the situations are showing up for many of us in a lot quicker, a lot more often. And I'm seeing, for me, the more that I'm staying aware and asking for help from my guides to help me see what this really is about. But just by being aware that I'm being triggered because something's, it's not about this is who I am, and this, and I don't attach to the fear so easily. I feel it, and it's miserably uncomfortable at times, really uncomfortable, but it doesn't last. It's like if I can just allow it, like, I hear you, I see you, kind of thing. I'm not trying to resist you, fear, this fear, whatever that fear is related to, or anger, or whatever it is. I see you, I feel you. And then it's energy. So it just moves, it moves on, it moves outside of us, through us, not really, it moves through us. And so it is released. And again, then we've released energy that we were holding. So that's the beginning, to start there, to begin to just become aware of your reactions and responses to people, to circumstances, to situations. Just begin to notice that first. Then you can start to inquire within. Notice when you're blaming something outside of yourself for your particular way of feeling, whether it's anger or fear or some kind of upset. Just know it's not from, nothing can cause you outside of yourself to feel anything. It's not possible. So it has to be something within you that's going to be triggered. So I hope that this makes sense, but I felt like I really wanted to expand on this idea. One, I'm going through it myself right now, and I know other people are as well. And just to keep it kind of top of mind, will help. And, there's no doubt none of us like feeling, we don't enjoy feeling these triggers. Now, somebody may ask, well, are there good triggers? Yes, but not in the same way. So I don't want to confuse. I don't know if you could call them triggers. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like a sunset, beautiful sunset, or a beautiful flower garden. Those feel outside of us, and they cause a response within. But it's a little bit different than these triggers I'm talking about. So it's not just that we're only can react to what we could call negative triggers. That's not what I'm saying. So don't confuse the two. So let's just keep this as what it is when we have these automatic reactions that don't feel good. This is when we definitely want to inquire within. That's it. It's kind of simple, really. Not so simple to do, but simple to understand. And remember, it's not something that you want to work through in your mind. It's not logic. It definitely is not logic. So there you have it. And I hope this helps somebody. I really hope it made some sense. And like I said, I just felt it's important that we're kind of getting more in touch with these things now. So I invite you to comment, particularly if you have an idea or something to share about this that we're talking about. That'd be great. Also, subscribe and a like if you've liked this video. And don't forget, if you'd like to let me know or talk to me, my contact information is below, and talk to me about sharing some of your stories. That would be awesome. Love to hear from you. And that's about it. And as always, I always say, be kind to yourself. That's what I've been working on as well. That's the other thing right now. It's really is important that we can be kind to ourselves, because the truth is, until we really can be kind to ourselves, we're not as good at being kind to others, even though we think we are, right? We do, and we want to be, but, let's work on being kind to ourselves. It shouldn't be work, but I don't know what to call it. Anyway, in the meantime, until next time, take care. I'm going to use my little clicker to click this thing off and see if today will be the day it only takes one click. I don't know why it's taking several clicks. I don't understand it. But let's give it a shot, okay? Take care.